When the alien sovereign saw his last stand, she didn't order an attack. She took notes. But right now, Valia was entirely paralyzed by the sensation of his bare hand pressing firmly against her primary thorax. The combat simulator hummed a low, distant drone, completely drowned out by the sudden, deafening hammer of her secondary heart against her ribs. Elias leaned closer. His body heat radiated into her like a physical weight. Her lower respiratory vents flared, drawing in short, panicked gasps of the sterile air. He was adjusting the composite armor plating over her collar, his ungloved fingers inadvertently brushing the highly sensitive, iridescent scales of her neck. A deep violet flush rushed up her ridges. She froze, trapped in an impossible gravity well. 1 human, 6 months, 0 surrender. And yet his touch was devastatingly gentle. The psychological tether of command simply snapped. Valia stopped breathing altogether as his thumb caught a loose strap, pulling his unarmored frame a fraction of an inch closer to her face. Only 10 minutes ago, this was just a standard tactical review. Elias had survived his isolation through pure weaponized stubbornness. The Earth Coalition abandoned him as a statistic. The galaxy's deadliest empire crowned him a legend. Ironically, none of that mattered to him as much as fixing a faulty clasp. Velia had originally requested a private demonstration of his improvised defensive mechanics. It turned out that the Zyrali, for all their flawless military academies, possessed zero understanding of human gut instinct. They operated on rigid institutional allegiance. Elias, heavily scarred but remarkably patient, he operated solely on earned, mutual respect. He spent the morning explaining why barricading a structural choke point with repurposed scrap was superior to deploying a standardized energy shield. Valia listened with perfect posture, her forearms neatly folded, desperately trying to mask her utter bewilderment at his chaotic, biological intuition. But theory eventually gave way to practical application. Elias noticed her ceremonial plating was misaligned, a fatal flaw in the close quarters skirmishes they were reviewing. He didn't order a subordinate to correct it. Humans, driven by their baffling, primate-brained empathy, just took care of things themselves. He stepped directly into her personal space without a single hesitation, treating the fearsome ruler of a multi-system dominion with the casual, protective care of a mechanic tending to an old, trusted friend. For Elias, it was just a routine adjustment. He remained completely oblivious to the monumental cultural static he was currently generating. To a Zirali, allowing another being to manually manipulate armor near the throat was an act of absolute submission, an intimately primal connection historically reserved for a bonded mate. And he was just standing there, smelling faintly of synthetic rations and ozone, casually muttering about kinetic deflection angles. Her rigid scales began to flush from cool silver to a burning, compromised amethyst. She watched his face, searching for a challenge. She found only a warm, disarmingly quiet focus. He reached up to secure the final shoulder latch. One of the heavy metallic latch snapped into place with a sharp click that echoed in the quiet space of the simulator. Elias finally stepped back, wiping a smudge of machine oil onto his fatigue pants. The sudden absence of his body heat left Valia shivering, though the ambient temperature of the room was perfectly regulated. Her scales were now a brilliant, impossible shade of violet. Elias tilted his head, his brow furrowing slightly. He studied her face, completely misreading the intense physiological panic rippling across her frame. "Too tight?" he asked. His voice was rough, a low rumble shaped by months of speaking to absolutely no one. "I had to jury-rig the locking mechanism. Standard issue clips are too rigid for your joint articulation." He reached out again, entirely unprompted, to tap the center plate. It was a terrifyingly casual gesture. "You have to leave a little room for unpredictability," he muttered, his focus dropping to the armor's seams. If you build it perfectly rigid, it breaks under pressure. You learn that the hard way when it's just you in a pile of scrap metal for 6 months. Survival isn't a science, it's an art. You improvise with what you have, and you make it hold. Valia managed to draw a steady breath, though her primary vocal cords felt useless. She looked down at the human. He was so small compared to her, so undeniably fragile. Yet he had broken a siege that would have routed a heavily armed battalion. The coalition saw an expendable asset. She saw a master craftsman of survival, someone who viewed asymmetrical warfare not as a desperate scramble, but as a deliberate, creative discipline. It is, Valia started, her voice betraying a slight tremor. She cleared her throat, willing the violet flush to recede. It is perfectly adequate, Elias. Thank you. He smiled. It wasn't the sharp, predatory grin of a warrior. It was a soft, lopsided thing that carried the quiet relief of a man who had finally found a place to rest. He had survived total isolation, clinging to life out of sheer spite. But standing here in the soft lighting of the training deck, he had clearly found his true legacy. He wasn't just instructing soldiers. He was rebuilding his own humanity. Good, Elias said softly. He didn't turn away to check his data pad or consult a training manual. He just stayed there, looking up at her with an infuriatingly patient warmth. Because out there, armor doesn't matter if you don't trust the person watching your back. And I'm watching yours. The cultural static between them finally broke. Valia slowly reached out, her lower right hand moving with deliberate hesitation, and rested two scaled fingers lightly against his shoulder. A heavy, awkward silence stretched out, completely devoid of tension. It felt incredibly right. He didn't pull away from the contact. Instead, he simply let out a long, quiet breath, grounding himself in the reality that he was no longer alone. Then I shall watch yours, she replied softly.